Thank you very much for your invitation to participate to this very interesting and very challenging meeting. The topic is very complicated. I'm not an expert in institutional dimensions. I'm an economist, so I will have a look at the farm to fork strategy with an economic approach. So the case study I'm going to present is related to this farm to fork strategy, and I will try to deal with the question: what can we expect from the European farm to fork strategy in terms of impacts, economic, market, and non-economic impact. This morning, many elements were mentioned, so I don't want to repeat the same things. Just repeat that we have to face important challenges on economic and social dimensions, on dimensions related to the environment and public health challenges. And so the question really is, how is it possible to achieve sustainable and healthier food systems, and what action levels can be used? The Green Deal proposes a set of objectives and action levels through the climate plan, the farm to fork strategies, the biodiversity strategy, and so on. And the questions I would like to deal with are what market and non-market impact can have this strategy. What are the main trade-offs behind this strategy? What are the most critical issues, the blocking points, and what public policies are required in order to overcome these blocking points? In my field, many prospective studies, biophysical models, economic models have been used to try to answer this question. And in this talk, I will use a recent research project in which we use economic different type of models in order to estimate, to assess this potential impact of the farm to fork strategy on market and non-market dimensions. It was mentioned this morning, the European Green Deal's farm to fork strategy is based on the food system approach, because it proposed to use supply side and demand side action levers. And I would like to focus on three types of action levers, which are the first lever is a change at the farm level, is a change in agricultural practices to reach climate and biodiversity objectives through the adoption of agricultural practices. And the farm to fork strategies set some quantitative objectives, which are to reduce by at least 50% of the use of chemical pesticides, to achieve at least 25% of the agricultural land under organic farming, to reduce by 20% the use of fertilizers, and to bring back at least 10% of the agricultural land under high diversity landscape features. So it's very important because we have quantitative objectives, and it's very convenient because we can analyze what they could have, what impact they could have. The second level of action is related to the reduction of waste and food losses in food chain. It was mentioned also this morning through the adoption of circular economy principles, and at the consumer level through change in consumer behaviors. And there is a quantitative target, which is to reduce by 50% waste and losses in the food chains, and at the consumer level. And the third lever, action lever, is the change in consumers' diets and the adoption by consumers, the adoption of more sustainable and healthier diets. There is the farm to fork strategy doesn't provide any quantitative objective about this third action lever. But we know that this lever involves changing the consumption of fruit and vegetables, legumes, and the reduction of the consumption of processed and red meat, for instance. And in this talk, I will only consider, to simplify the analysis, I will only consider a 20% decrease in the demand of meat and animal-based product, and a partial substitution between animal and plant-based proteins. So what can we say? What can we say about the potential impact of the farm-to-fork strategy on the basis of the available literature and the different elements we have? If we consider first the agricultural practices, once again, based on the reduction of the use of pesticides, better carbon storage in soil, and so on, the adoption of these practices would lead first to a decrease in produced quantities because of a reduction of yields and a reduction of the size of the production land. This could lead to an increase in prices at the farm level and to a lesser extent at the consumer level. The consequence would be an increase in consumers' expenditures. The results about the partial revenues are ambiguous because it depends on the studies, because there are two effects. The price increase tend to increase the income, but the reduction of the quantities tend to decrease the incomes. With our data, we obtain a small increase in the producer revenues thanks to the adoption of agricultural practices. And the last consequence is an increase in imports, especially imports of crops for feed. On non-market dimensions, we identify two effects. The first effect, which is a positive impact due to the agroecological practices and the reduction of the domestic production size, which is good for the environment, climate, and biodiversity, but a negative impact due to the increase in imported emissions. Regarding waste reduction by 50% through a circular bioeconomy, consumer behavior, and so on, the consequences are a decrease in prices and a decrease in produced and purchased quantities, leading to a decrease in consumer expenditures, a decrease in producer revenues, and a decrease in net imports. And the effects on climate and biodiversity are positive because of, first, the reduction of the production size, but also the reduction of the imported emissions. Regarding the third level of action, the diet change, we can identify different elements. First, clearly, a decrease in prices and quantities of in the livestock sector. On the plant sector, it's more ambiguous because on the one hand, there is an increase in the food demand, but on the other hand, a decrease in the feed demand. Overall, we can consider that this would decrease, that this could lead to a decrease in the consumer expenditures, increase the producer revenues in the plant sector, but strongly decrease the producer revenues in the livestock sector, and would decrease the net imports. And at the end of the day, on the non-market dimensions, the effect on climate and biodiversity will be positive due to the reduction of the domestic production size and due to the decrease in the imported emissions. And we also could get a positive impact on the nutritional quality of the diets, thanks to the change in the dietary patterns. I don't have enough time to present the quantitative results, but I would like to show you just one figure about the greenhouse gas emissions. When we use only the agroecological level, I said that this could lead to an increase in imports and a decrease in the exports. And then in this framework, we obtain, compared to the current situation, a reduction by 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions related to the domestic production in Europe. But if we take into account the imported emissions, the decrease is much smaller, and around 5%. 5% reduction of greenhouse emission. But if we consider the three action levers together, in this case, we observe smaller increase in imports and increased imports, especially of animal products. And in this case, when we combine the three action levers, the impacts in terms of domestic production-based greenhouse gas emissions, the decrease is around 20%, and this decrease is amplified by the trade effect. It's just an example, but it's to show you that it's very different to use one action lever and to combine them. And when we combine them, we can have synergies between levels which have such results. So if I try to sum up the results, when we consider only the agroecological practices, we obtain significant environmental benefits, but lower produced quantities, increase in agricultural prices, and to a lesser extent in food prices, increase in producer revenues, but to a lesser extent in consumers' food expenditures, higher quantities imported, lower quantities exported, which reduces the environmental benefits. And when we combine the three action levers, the increased food expenditures induced by agroecology are more than offset by the losses and the diet levels. Positive neutral impact on consumers, gain for producers, but losses for livestock farmers, and reduce import and increase in exports for greater environmental benefits. So regarding the topic of this meeting, I would like to use this result to focus on some critical points. First, I would like to say that the winners and the losers depend on the level of action. And if we assume that the winners and the losers, in fact, depend on the field of policy, and then this could explain in some case conflicts or contradictions between policies. Overall, the impact of the market and non-market dimension differ depending on whether the levels of action are implemented alone or together. And no single level of action is sufficient to achieve ambitious sustainability goals. They must be combined. And in this case, agroecological transition is possible if, and maybe only if, the two other levels of action are also implemented at the same time. And this raises some issue related to the critical interface between public policy. Here, I've just merged the three previous figures. Don't be afraid by the picture. I've just merged the previous figures, just to have an overall vision, in fact, of the three action levels, and with their interactions, the main interactions between them. So a systemic vision, if you want, of these action levels, and this allowed to identify, from my point of view, the most critical issues at the interface of the different policies. The first one is that it could be related to innovation policy, is the fact that with agroecology, we could have a decrease in yields and then in the production levels. And this raises very complex question, because in this case, we have also the different consequences I mentioned. But it raises also an important question about, in this case, what are the producers' incentives to adopt agroecology? And I said that in the models, the policy revenues increase a little bit with agroecology. But it's true if all the producers change at the same time, because they will benefit from higher prices. But one producer alone has no interest to adopt agroecology, because he loses in quantity without benefiting from higher prices. I will not develop this issue, but it's clearly related also with trade and the consequences of trade on the environment. And this dimension must be connected in public policy. Another important dimension is related to food prices and social dimensions, social inequalities. If the price increase, clearly this raises important issues about social dimensions, accessibility of food, affordability of food. And I said that a way to compensate the effect of price, the effect of higher prices, is to change the dietary patterns. If you change the dietary patterns, it's a way to compensate higher prices with less meat, for instance. But are we sure that consumers are willing to change their dietary patterns? This is a crucial issue in the future. And this raises questions about the demand-side policies, how to create incentive for the consumers to change their dietary patterns. So it means policy related to information, to labeling, but also policy related to the food environment of consumers. Not only price, but also marketing issues, advertising, and so on, which are also important dimensions which influence the consumer's behavior. So there are an important field which is clearly connected with all these dimensions. I did not mention a lot the nutritional dimensions in my talk, but clearly there are also major issues related to the nutritional quality of foods. Because if consumers shift towards more plant-based diets, but if the plant-based products are rich in sugar, salt, or fat, in this case, the consequences from public health won't be so good. And finally, I would like just to mention a huge issue, which is the future of the livestock sector, because we can show that the diet change could lead to a strong decrease in the economic value of the livestock sector. And the question is how to facilitate, how to support the restructuring of the livestock sector, which is, for me, one of the most important questions we have to address in Europe in this dimension. So with this figure, with this scheme, we can identify some critical interfaces between public policy dimensions. And I think that if we want to progress towards a greater coherence between public policy, we clearly have to better identify this critical interface where the interdependencies and the complementarities between policy are clearly involved. Thank you for your attention.